In the stillness before dawn, a small medieval village lies quietly at rest. Clusters of humble wattle and daub cottages, with thatched roofs, huddle together on a gentle rise of land. Around them, the dark outlines of barns and byres can be seen, forming a snug ring at the village center. Encircling the homes are broad open fields and pasture commons, fading into shadow where the nearby woodlands begin. A chill pre-dawn breeze rustles through the trees and ripples across the thatch, carrying the faint smell of damp earth and wood smoke from last night's fires. In the distance, a single church bell softly tolls the first hour, its echoes mingling with the whisper of wind in the trees, gently heralding the approach of morning. As we wander through this quiet scene, if you find comfort in these gentle journeys through the past, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so lovely to see how far these quiet stories reach. One by one, a few dim lights begin to appear as embers are stirred to life on cottage hearths. Dawn is breaking, and a pale gray light seeps into the sky. From a low cottage door, a villager steps out into the cool air, pulling a woolen cloak tight around her shoulders. A tendril of smoke rises from each thatched roof as families coax small fires back to flame, the thin smoke twisting upward and carrying the hearty scent of peat and wood. The ground is damp with dew, and in places the lane through the village has turned to mud from the recent rains, puddles quietly reflecting the first light. A rooster crows somewhere, answered by another in the next yard. The village is waking. In this medieval hamlet, built on the Lord's manor lands, life stirs with the sunrise. The houses are tiny, most just a single-room hut made of timber poles woven with twigs and plastered with clay and dung, the simple construction known as wattle and daub. Their thatched roofs are dark with age, tufts of straw overhanging low eaves. Windows, if you could call them that, are little more than small openings covered with oiled animal hide or wooden shutters. Many homes have no glazed glass at all. In the early light, these huts look humble and a bit crooked, with walls that lean and sag, but they are home. Last night's cooking smells of smoke and stew still cling to the air around each doorway. Here and there, a pig roots about near a pen, and a couple of geese wander freely, already foraging along the common green. The village's heart is a tiny green commons and a shallow duck pond, really just a large watering hole. At its edge, ducks sleep with heads tucked under wings, and a pair of white geese leave gentle ripples as they glide across the pond. This communal pond is more than a picturesque detail. It's where cattle and sheep might drink, where women sometimes wash clothes, and even a source of fish or wild waterfowl in lean times. In the quiet of dawn, the pond lies still, reflecting a pearly sky, while the rest of the world slowly awakens. All around the village, the great open fields stretch out, blanketed in morning mist. Unlike the small fenced patchwork of modern fields, these are open expanses without hedges, divided only by narrow strips of unplowed grass. Each family in the village tends a few strips of this land, scattered in different parts of the fields, so that good soil and bad are shared. Through the mist, you can just make out the long ridges and furrows in the fields, the pattern left by the plow's work over years, curving gently across the landscape. Along one edge of the field stands a line of ancient oaks marking a boundary. Beyond them lies the Lord's forest. At the other edge, a clear stream winds its way toward the village, its gentle gurgling faintly audible in the silence. By that stream sits a weathered mill, its water wheel still now, waiting for the miller to come and grind the night-soaked grain into flour at first light. Everything is wrapped in a hush. As the sky grows lighter, the rhythm of daily life begins. A second bell rings from the small stone church at the village's edge, its tone calm and steady. In the silence of the medieval countryside, the bell's call carries far, floating over the fields to signal the day's beginning. From all directions, villagers in homes and out in barns pause and listen. The local priest, having already said his Latin prayers for prime in the dimness of the chancel, gives the rope a few measured pulls. The bell's voice fades, and the village truly comes alive. In one cottage, a family murmurs a brief prayer together, crossing themselves as they do each morning. Though they don't understand the Latin words of the Ave or Pater Noster, they know the reverent shape of them by heart, learned from the priest's gentle instruction. A mother lifts an iron cauldron and swings it back over the hearth fire to boil what's left of last night's broth. Its aroma mingles with the smell of smoldering wood and damp thatch. Children rub sleep from their eyes and help their father find his work tools, a wooden rake, a flail for threshing, a worn leather glove, whatever the day's labor needs. Soon, many of the able-bodied men will head out to the fields with the rising sun. The working day in this village follows the sun's arc across the sky. In summertime, this might mean an early start even before the sun fully clears the horizon. By now, the eastern sky is glowing, and a golden light washes over the common fields. Men and women step out onto the dirt lanes, breathing the crisp morning air. A pair of oxen lows from a byre, awaiting the day's first task. 2 village oxen have been yoked together by a team of peasants, neighbors working in tandem, and now they are led slowly toward the field, hoofs leaving deep prints in the soft earth of the path. The oxen's breath puffs white in the chilly dawn. Behind them, 3 men carry a heavy plow with its wooden frame and an iron-tipped share. They will take turns guiding it through the soil. Farming is the lifeblood of this little community. Nearly everyone here is a farmer of some sort, toiling on their own small strips of land, as well as on the Lord's Demesne's fields. They often work cooperatively, sharing tasks like plowing and haymaking among families, for the fields are vast and one family's ox team can't do it all alone. Today, perhaps, they will plow the west field for spring barley. Tomorrow or next week, the whole village might gather to cut hay in the meadows. Daily life revolves around this agrarian calendar of plowing, planting, weeding, and harvesting, all guided by the turning of seasons and the position of the sun. Now, as the sun lifts above the tree line, the first long rays of light slant across the fields. The villagers in the ox team reach the broad open field beyond the village. They pause a moment, looking out over the blank canvas of pale earth. Birds are singing from the hedgerow by the forest. Larks trill invisibly up in the growing light. The men share a few quiet words, a plan for who takes the first turn, holding the plow, and who will goad the oxen. Then, with a soft cluck of his tongue, one man urges the oxen forward. The plow's iron blade bites into the soil, and a long ribbon of earth curls aside, moist and brown. The fresh scent of turned soil rises to meet the day. Furrow after furrow, the team works methodically, their figures moving slowly across the field in the golden morning. Over the next ridge, another plow team is doing the same. Neighbors coordinate so that each family's strips get plowed in the proper season. In some fields, wheat or rye shoots already rise green from earlier sowing, laid out in countless slender strips. The open field system means everyone's lands are intermixed. Your acre here, my half acre there, all unfenced and side by side. It requires cooperation and trust. No one can harvest until everyone's crop is ready, and fallow fields for grazing are shared in common. As the sun climbs, villagers in different parts of the fields call out greetings across the furrows. The voices carry easily in the clear morning air. Back in the village, other work is underway. Not everyone has gone out to plow. At the communal well on the green, 2 women draw water, their breath misting as they chat quietly about the day's tasks. One balances a wooden bucket on her hip, careful not to slosh the precious water. Clean water for cooking and washing is laboriously hauled every morning. Nearby, under the broad canopy of an oak tree at the green's edge, an old man sits on a stool, already at work repairing a broken tool handle. His gnarled hands and careful knife whittle a piece of ash wood. This elder has seen 60 winters, his face weathered, his white beard thin, and now he contributes not by heavy field work, but by mending, carving, and remembering. A small boy stands beside him, watching the shavings curl to the ground, learning by observing the patience of age. From a cottage by the lane, the rhythmic scrape of a cornstone can be heard. Inside, a young woman kneels on the hard-packed earthen floor, grinding grain. The hand quern is basically 2 circular stones. She turns the top stone against the bottom with a wooden handle, and each turn crushes a trickle of yesterday's dried oats into coarse flour. It is heavy, tiring work, often the task of women in the household, but it will provide the meal for the day. Her hands and apron are dusted with pale flour. By her side, near the open doorway, an infant plays on a blanket, chewing a crust of bread. Sunlight slants in low, illuminating motes of smoke and dust swirling in the air. The inside of the cottage is dim and modest, a single room for a family of 5. In the center, a small fire crackles on a flat hearthstone. There is no chimney. The smoke curls up freely, lingering under the roof before finding its way out through a hole at the apex or through the thatch itself. The rafters above are blackened with years of soot. A 3-legged iron pot hangs over the fire, and already a simple pottage of beans, herbs, and turnips simmers there for the midday meal. In one corner of the room, a few chickens scratch at the dirt floor, clucking softly. They've wandered in and out as they please. And partitioned off at the back by a rough wooden hurdle is a small pen where the family's goat is kept, still munching on a wisp of hay from last night. It's not unusual for livestock to live under the same roof as the family. Often a third of the hut is penned off for a cow, goat, or a few sheep, whose body warmth helps on cold nights. The mingled smell of animals and humans, of cooking and smoke, and the ammonia of old straw is strong but familiar. The floor underfoot is simply packed earth, strewn with last summer's dried rushes and straw. Every so often, when the floor covering becomes too filthy, fresh rushes are gathered and spread anew. In the meager light, one can see the furnishings are sparse: a rough-hewn table against the wall, a couple of stools, and a large wooden chest that holds what little bedding and clothing the family owns. Above the hearth hangs a bundle of dried herbs, thyme and sage for medicine and flavor, and maybe a braid of garlic. By the door, on a peg, hangs a coil of rope and a woven basket ready for use. Despite the smoke and soot, despite the cramped space, this cottage exudes a simple homeliness, the warmth of the fire, the scent of herb broth, and a well-swept corner where the family sleeps together. Against one wall, straw-filled mattresses are laid out for sleeping, the straw crinkling with any movement. These are essentially large sacks or tick mattresses stuffed with straw or dried reeds, and they are flocked together on the floor at night. A few coarse wool blankets, threadbare but neatly folded, are stacked in the wooden chest for when they are needed. The bedding is not luxurious. Often it is infested with lice or fleas that thrive in the straw and textiles, but after a long day of work, it offers some comfort. Here and there, patches on the blankets show where careful darning has tried to extend their life. A small cradle for the baby stands near the hearth, padded with an old cloak as a makeshift lining. Above it, hanging from a rafter, is a simple mobile of sorts, a tiny wooden cross and a sprig of dried rosemary tied together, meant to bless the infant and ward off evil spirits. In the evenings, when the family gathers by the hearth, the soft light would fall on these very humble domestic details: the simple beds, the few treasured items like a brass pot or a carved cup creating dancing shadows on the smoky walls. Outside, the village lanes are now busy with morning activity. An older girl in a patched dress walks down the lane, gently driving a gaggle of geese ahead of her with a long switch. The geese honk and waddle, occasionally flapping their wings in protest as she urges them along. Her task this morning is to take the family's geese to the common meadow by the stream, where they can forage for worms and weeds. Many children in the village have similar chores, herding geese or pigs, fetching water, or watching younger siblings while the adults labor in the fields. It is a way for them to learn responsibility early. The girl's little brother trails behind, clutching a stick sword he's whittled from a branch, stomping in the muddy puddles left in the ruts of cartwheels. Their laughter echoes briefly as the geese pick up their pace, one particularly bold gander trying to nip at the boy's ankle. The children shoo the birds onto the green, where a few other geese and a stray sheep or two are already nibbling. Later in the year, after the harvest, these very geese will be allowed into the stubble fields to feast on the dropped grain, being fattened up for Michaelmas festivities. A well-fed goose on Michaelmas Day, the feast of St. Michael in the autumn, is a traditional treat, signifying prosperity and the turning of the agricultural year. For now, though, the geese are simply part of the everyday chorus of the village, quacking and pecking as the morning unfolds. From the open door of the smithy, a small timber shed near the center of the village, comes the sharp cling of hammer on iron. The blacksmith has begun his work early. Inside the smithy, a fire glows in a stone forge, and sparks fly as the blacksmith pumps a pair of bellows to heat it. The red-orange light flickers on the smith's face, and the iron tools lining the walls. Villagers will bring him broken plowshares, knives to be sharpened, axe heads that need mending. He is a crucial figure in the village economy, one of the few specialized craftspeople among the peasants. Already this morning, a farmer has stopped by with a plow blade dulled by many rocky furrows. The blacksmith grips it with his tongs and presses it into the coals. The air shimmers with heat. Outside, a couple of village dogs lie in the dust by the door, noses on paws, unbothered by the occasional clang from within. A woman passes by carrying a basket of grain. She pauses to exchange a friendly word with the smith, mentioning that her husband will bring by a broken wagon pin later. The blacksmith nods, wiping sweat with a sooty sleeve, and returns to tapping rhythmically at a glowing piece of iron on his anvil. The distant ring of the smith's hammer can be heard across the green, one of the many comforting sounds of daily life here. It blends with the lowing of cattle being driven out to pasture and the creak of a wooden cart starting down the road. As the morning advances, the sun climbs higher and the chill lifts. In the wide fields, villagers labor steadily. Women join the men after finishing their household tasks. Some come to weed between the rows of young crops or to scatter seed behind the plow. Most peasants spend the bulk of their day farming their strips of land, tending to rye, oats, barley, peas, and whatever vegetables they can grow for their family. On a day like this, you would see rows of people bent at the waist, weeding or planting with simple tools, wooden hoes and knives. Their clothes are earth-toned and plain, undyed wool and homespun linen, made to be serviceable. A few have tied kerchiefs or hats to block the sun. The fields are truly the center of their world. They know every inch of these lands, every rise and dip, by heart. They know which patch floods in heavy rain and which corner yields the first ripe barley. There is a sense of shared purpose as they work side by side, calling out jokes or bits of news from one strip to the next. Periodically, the labor pauses. Around mid-morning, at roughly the third hour, tertiary, the church bell peals again, a quicker, lighter peal this time. Many workers in the field straighten up, stretch their backs, and cross themselves, murmuring a brief prayer of thanks for the strength to work. Some take a swig of weak ale from leather jacks they've brought. The ale brewed at home is a safer drink than water. A few of the older men pull out knives and begin to cut up an onion or a bit of cold barley bread to share for a snack. All across Christendom, these bells mark the rhythm of the day. Time for prayer, time for meals, time for rest, and here too, they are the pulses of village life. Even if each village's bells might differ slightly in timing, they regulate daily life for everyone within earshot. The sunlight now is strong on their faces, and a lark's song rains down from somewhere in the blue above. By noon, the sun is high and bright. The open fields shimmer with heat, and workers seek shade where they can. Some have walked back to the village for the midday meal, while others take their repast in the fields. Under the same oak that stands near the edge of the field, perhaps the one where a marker stone divides one manor's land from the next, a group of laborers gathers for a simple lunch. They sit in the grass, passing around a coarse loaf of rye bread and a small piece of cheese. One man has an onion and cuts slices to share on the bread. A woman brings a pot of pottage, a thick soup of beans and herbs wrapped in cloth to keep warm, and each person takes a scoop with a wooden spoon. There is not an abundance of food, but enough to satisfy and give energy for the afternoon's work. Wiping sweat from their brows, they talk quietly, looking out over the fields that are their life's canvas. Someone remarks how well the wheat is growing this year. Another hopes aloud for rain at just the right time next week. These little conversations in the shade strengthen the bonds of the community. They have known each other since childhood. They have worked side by side through many seasons, celebrated holy days together, mourned each other's losses. Out here, in the midday lull, one can feel the deep connection they have to the land and to each other. Back in the village, midday is a brief time of rest and domestic activity. The cottages are quieter now that many are in the fields, but you'll find a few villagers going about their tasks. Near one home, an older woman and a young daughter sit on a bench in the narrow strip of sunlight by the door, carding and spinning wool. In their laps lie tufts of sheep's wool, shorn in the spring. Using wooden carding paddles, they tease and straighten the fibers. Then, with a drop spindle, a weighted stick that twists the wool into thread, the woman skillfully spins a fine yarn. The spindle hangs and twirls, drawing out the fiber, while the girl watches intently, trying to mimic with her own smaller spindle. Spinning wool and flax is common work for women and girls at home, especially in the quieter times of day or in winter months. The soft whir of the spindle and the gentle scraping of the cards add a drowsy sound to the warm midday air. In another shady spot, an elderly man with a straw hat is weaving a basket from willow reeds. His gnarled fingers interlace the slender green rods over and under, creating the base of a sturdy basket. He does this slowly, both because age has slowed him and because basketry demands patience. By his side, a small pile of finished baskets rests, ready to be traded or used at the next market day. These quiet crafts are part of the village's lifeblood too. Not everyone can be in the fields all day. The very young, the old, and many women keep the home fires burning and the necessary crafts going. They will brew ale, bake bread, tan leather, carve wood, or make clothing as needed, each according to their skills, contributing in their own way to the community's well-being. A little apart from the cottages, near the churchyard stands the bakehouse and the brewhouse, small outbuildings used by villagers for essential food preparation. On certain days, the communal oven is heated, and each household brings their kneaded loaves to bake. Today, you can smell the nutty aroma of bread wafting from the cracks of the bakehouse door. The baker, covered in flour, uses a long-handled peel to slide round loaves into the clay oven's hot maw. These loaves are brown, made of maslin flour, a mix of rye and wheat, or barley white bread of pure wheat is a luxury reserved for lords. For most villagers, bread and pottage are daily fare. Nearby, at the brew house, a woman stirs a great oak barrel where malted barley is fermenting into ale. Brewing is a regular chore. Ale does not keep long and is brewed in small batches every few days. The warm, yeasty smell of fermenting grain and a hint of hops fills the air around the brew house. This small ale is weak in alcohol, but safer to drink than water from the stream, and everyone from the youngest to oldest partakes. As she stirs, the brewer woman, often called an alewife, recites a prayer under her breath that the brew will not spoil, perhaps a small charm passed down from her mother. The line between practical work and folk belief is thin. Many tasks have little blessings or superstitions attached. She might drop a clean wooden cross into the mash as it cools, a token of faith that the ale will be good. For now the scent of her work mingles with that of baking bread, creating an unexpectedly cozy atmosphere in the heart of this hard-working village. When the midday rest is over, a few peasant farmers drift back from the village, with full stomachs and perhaps a bit of fatigue. But there is more to do before day's end. In one fallow field turned common pasture, a group of villagers gather to mend some fences that have fallen into disrepair. Here the ground is used for grazing sheep and cows when it's not planted, and a simple post and rail fence lines the lanes to keep animals from straying into crop fields. Under the afternoon sun, the villagers work together, setting new stakes where old ones rotted, and tying off rails with strips of leather. General maintenance like road repair, clearing brush, and fixing fences is also part of village life, often done cooperatively or under the Lord's orders. A plump man with a leather pouch, the reeve, stands by making note of what's needed. The reeve is a local peasant, chosen each year to represent the Lord and ensure all duties are done. It's not an easy role. He must organize the planting and harvesting on the Lord's demesne, keep track of rents and fines, and prod his fellow villagers to work on projects like this fence mending. He calls out reminders of who owes a day's labor to the Lord this week, his tone friendly but firm. No one envies him, but all respect that it's his duty to mind such things. You can see by his furrowed brow that he keeps a mental tally of each household's obligations, who has plowed the demesne's fields this season, who has delivered their quota of firewood, who might be shirking. Most in the village are villains or serfs, bound by feudal duty to labor a certain number of days for their lord. The reeve's job is to see that this work gets done, yet he is also one of them, often a villain himself, elected from among their number. As he supervises the fence repair, he jokes with the others about how the Lord's sheep seem to think the grass is always greener beyond the fence. The men chuckle and work on, the camaraderie lightening the burden of obligation. Not far off, a shepherd is leading his flock of sheep back from the meadow toward the village folds. The sheepdogs circle and nip at stragglers, keeping the dozen or so ewes and their spring lambs in a tight group. The shepherd's life is solitary compared to the others. He spends his day roaming the fringes of the village lands, watching over sheep on the commons or rough pasture that the community shares. In spring, lambing season keeps him busy at all hours, welcoming the wobbly new lambs in chill dawns and ensuring each ewe accepts her young. He knows each sheep by sight, has named many of them little nicknames like Snowy for a particularly white ewe or brown ear for another. As he approaches the village, he guides the animals into a communal pen for the night. He'll smear a bit of tar or ointment on one lamb's healing wound, a mark from a difficult birth, and scratch the ears of his faithful dogs. To an outsider it might seem uneventful, but tending the flocks is a vitally important role. The sheep provide wool, one of the manor's valuable commodities, and even the church tithes might be paid in fleeces or lambs. The shepherd may be a hired hand or a younger son of a villain with no land of his own. Either way, he lives by the rhythm of the sunrise and sunset, the needs of his flock guiding him more than the bells do. Come winter, he'll lead the flock into fields after harvest to graze the stubble, and come shearing time in early summer, he'll work with others to shear and clean the wool. For now, his day's roaming is done, and the soft bleats of ewes calling to their lambs blend into the background hum of village sounds. By late afternoon, the angle of the sun begins to slant, and golden light washes over the village. It has been a long day of labor, and gradually the villagers in the fields finish their tasks. In the far field, the plowmen complete the last furrow of the day. They pause, wiping sweat and dirt from their faces, and admire the neat parallel lines of dark earth they've created. There's satisfaction in that moment, a job well done, another field ready for sowing. They unyoke the tired oxen, patting the great beasts affectionately on their flanks. The tools are gathered, the oxen driven ahead, and the group begins the walk home as the sun sinks lower. From other parts of the fields, small groups of villagers too are drifting back along footpaths and lanes toward the smoke of their hearths. Some carry bundles of kindling gathered from hedgerows, others a clutch of wild greens or mushrooms found at field's edge to add to supper. A few fortunate ones might carry a brace of rabbits snared in the woods, though hunting game is technically the Lord's right. A bit of illicit poaching of small animals is often overlooked or done furtively. They are weary, boots caked in mud and hands calloused, but they chat about the work tomorrow, whether the weather will hold fair for planting the next field or if they expect rain. At the entrance to the village, where the rutted dirt road widens slightly, stands the old oak tree, known as the Justice Tree. Its broad canopy has shaded many generations of villagers. Today, as the sun starts to set, a small gathering is taking place under its boughs. It is the manorial court session, called by the Lord's steward, and a handful of villagers have been summoned to address minor disputes. The steward, a stout man in a well-worn tunic of decent quality, sits on a three-legged stool with a ledger book in hand. On his right stands the reeve, hat in hand, and on his left the priest, present as a witness and moral guide. Before them, two neighbors stand nervously. One is accused of allowing his pigs to wander into the other's garden and root up the vegetables. The other is accused in turn of failing to maintain the fence between their plots. Voices are kept low and respectful. This is not a dramatic trial, just a community matter to be resolved. A few onlookers, mostly older villagers and children, cluster at a polite distance, curious to hear the outcome. After listening to both sides, the steward consults with the reeve about the customary law of the manor. With a fair but firm tone, he orders the pig owner to pay a small fine in compensation for the damage, perhaps a couple of pence or a portion of barley. The fence mender is instructed to repair the fence by the next court day. Both men nod solemnly, accepting the judgment. Such minor issues, stray livestock, boundary squabbles, or defaulting on a feudal due, are commonly handled here on the village level. It saves everyone the trouble of higher courts and keeps peace in the community. The steward notes the fine in his roll of parchment. The village clerk, a literate man who assists, will record it in the court roll for the manor's records. Next, a widow steps forward to seek the court's approval for her to take over her late husband's tenancy, a mere formality, as everyone knows her and the land she farms. She places a humble offering, perhaps a small fee or a chicken, at the steward's feet as Harriet or inheritance payment, and he pronounces that she may continue on her plot according to the custom of the manor. Her neighbors smile and nod, relieved she can keep her livelihood. The manorial court not only enforced bylaws, but also recorded changes in landholding and elected village officers like the reeve or hayward. Indeed, at Michaelmas each year, villagers gather here or in the Lord's barn to choose who will serve as reeve for the next year, or who will be the hayward, overseer of crops and hedges, or the beadle, a kind of constable. These positions, while burdensome, are marks of trust in the community. As the proceedings under the oak wrap up, the steward stands and stretches, satisfied that order is upheld. The little crowd disperses. One of the pig dispute neighbors even claps the other on the back as they walk home. Argument settled, no lasting rancor. Under the great tree's branches, now dappled with the low sun, justice has been done in the simple homespun way of the manor. Evening comes gently over the village. The vesper bell rings from the church, its mellow tones drifting over rooftops as the sky turns hues of orange and pink. This bell calls the faithful to evening prayer, even if most are too tired or far out in fields to attend daily. They pause in their homes to offer a silent Ave, or simply to take solace in the sound that marks day's end. A few villagers do make their way to the little stone church at the village center. It is a modest church, not large but built of enduring gray stones, perhaps a century ago. Its square tower houses a single bell, and perhaps a simple weathered clock face. At this hour, the setting sun paints the tower gold, and swallows dart around it, catching insects in the dusk. Inside, the church smells of incense and wax. The priest, a gentle soul with a wispy tonsure of graying hair, lights a few candles on the altar as the last of the daylight fades through the narrow stained glass window above. The window depicts the Virgin Mary and local saints in colored glass that splash jewel tones on the flagstone floor. A handful of parishioners kneel on the wooden benches or directly on the rush-strewn floor, murmuring responses in Latin as the priest intones the evening prayers. The villagers' faith is woven into their daily existence, providing comfort and meaning beyond the toil. They mark the passing of time not just by the sun and seasons, but by the liturgical calendar of feasts and fasts. Today might be an ordinary day after Pentecost, but soon there will be the Feast of Candlemas or the celebration of a local saint's day. The priest's voice is low and soothing as he prays for the health of the villagers, for good weather and a bountiful harvest, and for peace. Those present cross themselves and whisper, Amen. Stepping out of the church after Vespers, they each dip a hand in the stone stoop by the door, crossing themselves with holy water for protection. The first stars are appearing, and one by one they head home under the deepening indigo sky. As darkness settles, the activity in the village shifts to the home and hearth. The sounds of daytime give way to the sounds of evening, the last distant lowing of cattle settled in their byres, the cluck of hens roosting on a rafter, the whisper of wind through nearby pines. From every hut and hovel, the warm glow of firelight flickers through chinks in the walls and under thatched eaves. Inside one cottage, a family gathers around their hearth. The hearth is truly the center of home life. Its flames provide the only light and meager heat for the one-room house. The fire tonight is burning peat and dried dung mixed with wood. These fuels don't flame brightly, but give a steady, long-lasting burn. A few red embers cast a copper glow on the faces of the family. The mother ladles out portions of the evening pottage into coarse clay bowls. It's thin fare, boiled cabbage, roots, and maybe a bit of salted pork fat for flavor, but it is warm and filling. They eat slowly with wooden spoons, savoring each bite in the quiet. The father offers a short grace and thanks, ending in Latin, in nomine Patris, et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, Amen, which all repeat dutifully, even if they understand little of it. Their faith is simple but sincere. They rely on God's mercy as much as on their own hands. A hand-carved crucifix hangs above the hearth, catching the firelight, and little sprigs of blessed palm from last Palm Sunday are tucked into its frame, left there as a protective charm against storms and evil. After supper, the mother sets a small pot of ale to warm by the fire, a touch of spices added to make a comforting nightcap if they are lucky enough to have any spices at all. A thin curl of steam rises as she stirs in a rosemary twig. The children sprawl on the rug of rushes and straw near the hearth. One boy absent-mindedly twists straw into little figures. The girl cradles the family's tabby cat, stroking it as it purrs. The baby, now drowsy, nurses at the mother's breast, eyes half closed. The father, tired from the plow, leans against a stool and perhaps pulls out a small flute, a simple wooden pipe. In the hush of the evening, he plays a gentle melody, a local folk tune that is more lullaby than song. The notes are soft and meandering, blending with the crackle of the fire. The mother hums along faintly. Music is a rare treat reserved for these quiet hours, and though the instrument is rudimentary, in this moment it transforms the humble hut into a place of solace. In another home, an old grandmother sits near the hearth with a bit of sewing. She squints in the firelight as she pushes her bone needle through a torn shirt, carefully mending it. Her fingers are knotted with age, but she takes pride in each small, neat stitch. Beside her, her granddaughter is practicing embroidery on a scrap of linen, painstakingly stitching a tiny flower in faded blue thread. Embroidery and sewing by firelight are common evening pastimes for women who aren't too fatigued, adding a rare touch of beauty to otherwise plain garments. On the other side of the hearth, the grandfather nods in his chair, half listening as his son, the man of the house, quietly recounts news from the fields, or perhaps a story he heard from a traveler on the road. Storytelling is the old man's favorite entertainment. When he's alert, he loves to tell the grandchildren tales of brave saints, or of the wonders he saw years ago in the nearby town's market fair. Tonight, though, his eyes droop, and the warmth lulls him into a light doze. The room smells of smoke, yes, but also of the sweetness of dried herbs hanging from the beams, and the lanolin scent of wool from the fleece blanket across his lap. Over all the village, night falls fully. The stars emerge in their thousands, unhindered by any bright lights in this pre-modern world. The only illumination comes from hearth fires and a few resin candles or oil lamps flickering behind shutters. Most cottages cannot afford proper beeswax candles. They rely on cheap tallow dips made from animal fat, which burn with a sputter and a pungent smell. A traveler approaching the village now would see pinpricks of these lights and smell the distinctive mix of wood smoke and tallow on the air, along with the earthy tang of livestock. The roads are empty, the fields silent except for an owl's distant hoot. Distant across the darkened fields, one might catch the faint glow of the manor house if the lord or his steward is in residence. The manor house stands apart at the far end of the village, perhaps a two-story building of timber and stone. Tonight it is quiet too, with only a couple of lanterns burning in its small hall, and the kitchen. The lord himself might not be present. Often these manors are overseen by stewards, but if he is, his day likely ended with a richer meal and perhaps a cup of wine by his hearth. In any case, the peasant villagers rarely see into that world. For them, the manor house might as well be a distant star at this hour. Before people retire for sleep, many households take a moment for family prayer. In one cottage, after the supper bowls have been cleared and stacked, the father leads his family in reciting the Lord's Prayer. They speak it in Latin, Pater Noster, Quies in Caelus, because that is how they learned it, syllable by syllable, from the parish priest. The familiar rhythm is comforting, even if the full meaning is hazy. They then offer a simple petition in their own tongue, asking for protection through the night from storms, fire, and evil. The mother makes a subtle gesture, tracing a cross on the door with her thumb, a superstitious habit perhaps, to ward off wandering spirits of the dark. Many villagers carry quiet beliefs in spirits, elves, or ghosts alongside their Christian faith. A broom left by the doorway might deter a mischievous fairy from entering, or an iron knife placed under the cradle might keep witches away from the baby. Such are the little charms and precautions passed down through generations. The church officially frowns on superstition, but in these remote villages, the old ways and the new religion coexist in a gentle blend. The priest has likely provided the family with a bit of holy water, which they sprinkle in the corners on occasion for blessing, and maybe a medal of Saint Benedict hangs on the wall to guard against evil. Having completed their prayers, the family feels at peace. On special nights, there might be additional rituals. For instance, on the eve of a saint's feast day, villagers might light an extra candle or leave a loaf of bread as an offering for the poor in honor of the saint. On certain holy days like All Hallows' Eve, before All Saints' Day, they may place a small light in the window to guide friendly souls and keep harmful ones at bay, they say in whispers. But tonight is not one of those nights, just an ordinary evening of an ordinary day, the kind that forms the bulk of life's tapestry. From time to time, travelers come through the village even at night, perhaps a messenger on horseback or a band of pilgrims on their way to a far-off shrine. On a night like this, a pilgrim group might knock at the church door seeking shelter. Pilgrims are a common sight on the roads of medieval Europe, men and women of all stations wearing cloaks sewn with badges of saints and carrying long walking staves. They bring news of the wider world and tales of miracles. If any pilgrims pass through our village, the priest or a generous villager might offer them the barn to sleep in or a corner by the hearth. In return, the pilgrims often share stories of the shrine of St. James at Compostela, or the relics of Canterbury, or perhaps of Rome itself. They might show a curious child a little lead badge depicting a saint, or leave a token like a carved cross in thanks. For the villagers, these rare visitors are windows to a broader horizon beyond the fields. But such excitement is infrequent, and on most nights, like tonight, the roads are empty and the village belongs only to its own. Above the rooftops, the thatch of each house has turned silver with the first frost glinting in the moonlight. Autumn is deepening, and the nights have grown cold enough that by morning a delicate lace of ice will rim the water bucket and sheen the grass. Those still awake add a little more fuel to bank their fires for the night, a bit of peat or a damp log that will smolder slowly till dawn. A curfew bell rings out, a common practice across medieval villages and towns. At the sound of this evening bell, villagers know to cover their hearth fires. To cover the fire, or kufu, gives the bell its name. In settle in, it's a precaution against accidental fires that could devastate a village of timber and thatch. Here, one by one, households use metal lids or piles of ash to dampen flames, leaving just a warm glow. The village's lights twinkle out, and darkness enfolds the homes. Inside one cottage, a mother gently lays her baby in the cradle and rocks it with her foot, humming a timeless lullaby. The infant fusses softly, then relaxes as she murmurs a blessing. May the saints and angels watch over thee this night. In another home, a father and his young son step outside briefly into the cold night air to check on their animals. They walk to the little byre where the cow and the goats are kept. Their breath rises in ghostly plumes as they whisper to the animals, ensuring all is well. Satisfied, they close the creaking wooden door and return in, bolting their own cottage door against the night. They trust in the familiar sounds, the rustle of animals, the creak of timbers, to alert them to anything amiss. But mostly, nights pass uneventfully here, under the vigilant gaze of the moon and the quiet stars. Before sleeping, the villagers might reflect on the day and tomorrow's hopes in their own simple way. Perhaps the grandmother, slipping under a woolen blanket on her straw mattress, softly counts the beads of her rosary, each bead a prayer for a loved one, her fingers knowing the way in the dark. Across the lane, the blacksmith closes his shutters and mutters a quick prayer to Saint Eligius, patron of smiths, for the strength to swing the hammer again tomorrow. The last sound in the village may be the gentle chime of the church bell, marking compline, the final prayer hour, if the priest keeps that custom at night. Or it might be the distant howling of a wolf far off in the woods, answered by the barking of the village dogs who stand guard. A baby's brief cry is heard and then soothed. A cow shifts and lows softly in her sleep. These are the lullabies of the medieval village night. Soon, all are asleep, from the lord in his manor house under a fine embroidered coverlet, to the peasant family curled up together on their straw-filled bedding, even the dogs at the hearth and the sparrows nesting in the eaves of the barn. The common folk have labored from dawn until dusk, and their rest is well earned. In their dreams, perhaps they walk through blooming summer fields, or recall snatches of a song from a long-ago festival. The seasons will turn, and tomorrow will bring its own tasks: the lambing in spring, the haymaking in high summer, the harvest in autumn with its rush and relief, and winter's quiet when the fields lie fallow, and people turn inward to household crafts and holy observances. Each season has its labors and its brief holidays: Candlemas in the deep of winter, when new candles are blessed in the church, and folk notice the first lengthening of days; Rogation days in spring, when the priest leads a procession around the fields, banners fluttering to bless the sprouting crops; Midsummer's Eve, when even pious souls might join in lighting a bonfire on the hill in John the Baptist's honor, singing and dancing under the stars; Michaelmas in autumn, when the last sheaf of grain is cut and the village shares a modest feast of thanks, maybe roasting a goose and enjoying a cup of strong ale together. These moments of celebration punctuate their year, bringing joy and communal gratitude amidst the toil. But on this ordinary night, no festival distracts from the profound peace that settles over the village. In the wee hours, the village is nearly silent. The last ember in a hearth might crackle softly, or a sleeper might stir with a muffled cough, but otherwise all is still. The church tower stands against the sky, a silent guardian with its weathered bell, resting until matins or dawn. The fields, illuminated by moonlight, look ghostly and calm. A light frost has indeed formed, sparkling on the thatch and grass. Over the common land, one might see silhouettes of the sheep huddled together for warmth, and the lone figure of the shepherd wrapped in his cloak, sleeping near them under a haystack to guard against predators. A gentle fog begins to form in low hollows. Nature and human habitation are as one in these hours. The boundaries between the people and the land blur, as even the houses seem like mere mounds on the earth, part of the landscape that nurtures them. Then, as the stars wheel and the first hint of pale blue appears in the east, the cycle is poised to start anew. In a short while, a rooster will crow again. The priest, ever dutiful, will rise in the twilight to ring the matins bell and light his candle for prayer. The villagers will open their eyes, grateful for another day. They will stir the ashes and blow on the coals to relight their hearths. Smoke will once more snake up into the cool morning air, and the whole gentle rhythm of medieval village life will continue, unhurried, humble, and enduring. In this way, days, seasons, and generations flow together, each morning's light much the same as centuries before and after, touching the thatched roofs, the green, the church spire, and the surrounding fields with a timeless blessing. In the quiet heart of the Middle Ages, in a simple village of Western Europe, life moves in slow, dreamlike cycles, a boring history perhaps, but one filled with the soft poetry of everyday existence, meant to cradle the listener in a gentle journey to rest.